Hello and welcome to Data Leaders. Hopefully welcome back to Data Leaders for those of you who have subscribed over the last couple of weeks, and thank you if you have done that. To all of those who haven't, please tick the subscribe button or hit the subscribe button, tick the little bell next to it to make sure that you are updated with new recordings that we post. And the reason I say that is because we're going to continue doing these weeklies, and they will always come out on a Sunday, so you'll always know that. But we're going to be dropping new content because I've been overwhelmed with the amount of support that we've received over the last week. I've had a number of evening calls with many of you, and thank you so much for reaching out to me, getting in touch, and offering help to us to be a contributor in many different ways. So thank you once again. Also, if you're getting value from this content, please tick the like button and comment below. The reason we ask you to do that is it really helps the algorithm. It helps us get found as content, new content on the channel, and it helps us grow the community, which is good for everybody. The more people involved in the community, the better result we're going to get. So please tick like if you're getting value. Please leave us a comment. Tell us what you think of the content that we're producing, and also guide us. Tell us if there's things that you really want to hear about, or content you want us to build, or indeed if you want to help contribute and build that content with us, because you're very welcome, of course. So it's been a busy week, not only talking to the community and all of you, but recording this week has been challenging. Obviously reducing this down to 20 minutes. We've got it down to 21 minutes plus this intro, so probably 25 minutes overall. We'll continue to work on that, but I think it's much more compact and condensed this week. We have 3 topics rather than 6, so much better. And also I've had all sorts of technical challenges this week with recording this, and I've had lip sync issues, and then I've recorded things about 15 different times. So we continue to refine that and reduce the overall burden of actually producing these videos on a weekly basis. But I'll continue to get better at it, I promise. I'll continue to work hard at refining the process. So let's talk about the 3 topics we have this week. First of all, this came from 50 different topics that I looked at over this week to try and boil this down to 3. So if these are relevant for you, let me know. If they are missing the point, also let me know, and I'll change the tact of the things that I'm trying to look at and trying to bring you. 3 items this week. First of all, the 5 steps to building a new data science organization from scratch, but equally it's just as relevant, and you'll hear me say this in the piece itself, it's just as relevant to anyone building a data management organization, an MDM organization, etc., just as relevant. A lot of those things that they talk about in the data science, the 5 steps to success in the data science organization, actually refer directly back to things like data governance and other components. The second, following closely on from that and actually building on one of the 5 steps that's mentioned in the first article, is a very short article about how do you refine and focus on the right projects, the right data projects. And I add a little bit to that because it is a very short article. It's really positioning more so a webinar that takes place on the 11th of March, which also I recommend you take a look at when it comes along, because hopefully that will delve a little bit deeper into the issue of prioritization of topics. And then the third piece is a regulatory piece again this week, which is about the e-privacy regulation, moving on from the e-privacy directive from 2002 into a new e-privacy regulation, which will affect things like your use of WhatsApp, the use of webmail and other components, what they call over-the-top capabilities. So have a look at that. Still coming into law, but definitely a point after 14 revisions for you to take a look at it and start to understand and engage with your DPO around how it might affect how you manage the data, particularly if you're using those over-the-top capabilities like webmail, like WhatsApp messaging, etc. So be sure to stay tuned and take a look at that. And that's it for this week. Once again, please subscribe, please hit the little bell, please like and comment below, and we will see you in the content, and then I'll see you next week. Take care. See you soon. Okay, so to the first article. This is an article in Towards Data Science. It's a blog about 5 traps to avoid when building analytics and data science from scratch. So let's get straight on. This article sets out 5 different components based on actually Valentin's experience at a startup. And I don't know Valentin's full experience set, but he explains really well here some of the challenges you face in a startup environment building data science capabilities. But of course, actually, a lot of these capabilities are also present right throughout the data lifecycle and in large corporations. So I'll try and give you the context of that as we go through it. So trap number one, fixing dirty data after it has been produced. So key to get data quality metrics and data quality management into the process at the beginning. And of course, important, he doesn't really mention it here, important to put data governance in place. And that really is, in its most simple term, data ownership and data stewardship, so as you get responsibility and accountability in the right places in the business. And this is as important in a small startup as it is in a larger organization. I think you've seen it delivered more consistently at larger organizations and it's orders of magnitude simpler in a smaller organization, but certainly making sure people who feel accountable and responsible for the data is an important step. and Valentin really refers to this exactly here. So, however, you may receive some pushback because your stakeholders do not view clean data as a priority. Well, I think we've all seen that in our professional lives. Furthermore, cleaning data involves some effort from your stakeholders, since they need to help you to understand existing data and have to adapt to new processes to keep it tidy, suggesting the current processes aren't keeping it tidy enough. Or after all, human error is the main source of dirty data. And of course, back to my favourite phrase of all time, which is every data problem is a people problem in disguise. Most of this refers back to the process, and this emphasises the clear connection between data and the process that gets the data there in the first place. So, it talks about education, and instead you should educate all data producers about the importance of having clean data and adequate processes at an early stage. Explain the future cost of inaction to convince them to start with the cleanup before the stable becomes Augean. So realistically, we're really talking about the potential expense of having to continually clean data and build processes to clean data downstream rather than upstream. And the thing this doesn't really address either is the fact that not only does the data process need to start to adopt data quality, but it also needs to have consciousness of what the data is going to be used for downstream. We'll come to that a little bit when we talk about step 2. Trap 2 is launching the feature without data. And again, purely from a data science perspective, and it sounds like this guy has been working where he's been delivering a data product that is front-end based. The point he raises here is that dirty data is not great, but no data at all is potentially even worse, and both of those things are really bad. So you need to avoid doing that. And the thing he draws out here is quite often you can be through a feature set in terms of the delivery of a capability and you didn't capture the data you needed for future analysis. So working with your stakeholders and understanding what they're trying to achieve with the solution and the problems they're trying to solve and making sure that's properly squared in a box and managed in that way is critically important. Otherwise, you may find that you don't have the data necessary. Now, of course, this is also true in large organizations where actually you're trying to solve problems that are perhaps decades old, but actually the data has never been collected. And this is true, across financial services in many cases with KYC, where as the capability grew and the opportunity for better data analytics was created, often companies found that they actually didn't have the data to be able to serve those data analytics, and they were having to go back to documents and parse data out of documents into readable form. So it says it's your job to communicate your data requirements to product management and development when a feature is planned. I recommend to go through some steps. So it gives you some steps here. And the main takeaways before you launch a feature: agree with your stakeholders on the KPIs, work closely with the product manager and developers to ensure that you have the data to calculate them. The thing I'd add to that is also have a mind on the future. Start thinking about what other data you might need to collect, and obviously you're going to need to wrap that through data governance and the other capabilities. So trap 3, starting with the solution, not the problem. So Valentin really addresses here, again, this is a stakeholder challenge mostly, where stakeholders are used to a certain capability, and perhaps in startups they don't get the scale and the speed of the capability. But this is really a scope question, and the main takeaway: constantly remind yourself and your team of the acute customer problem you want to solve. He also talks about the solution. So it's not just about does the solution match the problem, it's also is the solution fit for the problem. So he talks about a great enthusiastic young team developing a neural network based solution, when in fact a statistical solution might be perfectly fine and probably be better from a performance perspective. So and certainly from a cost perspective. So it's not just the stakeholder problem, it's also within the team. Make sure that you're making the solution fit for the problem, and not too significant or too large or too complex. Track 4, limit data science to product R&D. And that's the problem, not a suggestion. So again, really what Valentin addresses here is be careful not to make data science just purely a research and development capability. It can add value to the entire organization. And I would say that about every function within a data organization: data science, data governance, data excellence, data quality capabilities, the data pipeline processes, all of those things, master data management, importantly, coming back to the process and the connection with that, all of those things have much broader value than R&D or operations or the things that they often serve. And that's the really important component about master data management. Master data management is often associated with getting a product into production or creating a product, when in fact actually it should be serving analytics. In the new digital world, master data management should be the pipeline for analytics, or at least one of the pipelines for analytics. And again, Valentin talks about the different age ranges, experience ranges you might have in the organization, and he says, however, almost every company and function can benefit from the skills and technology available in the data team, and that is absolutely true. If you want to harness the skills of the team to become efficient, data-driven organization, you need to collaborate with all business functions in a proactive manner and educate key stakeholders in data literacy. And there it is, data literacy and education being key components of the strategy, whether it's a small startup or a large enterprise-wide FTSE 100 company, CAC 40 company, whatever it is, whether you're 100,000 employees or 100 employees or 10 employees, data literacy is right at the core of the digital transformation journey. Item 5, over-engineering your reporting. And we've all seen this. Reporting just needs to serve its purpose. It's not a competition to create the most beautiful thing. It's actually a competition to create the most functional and action-oriented thing. So make sure that that's what it does. He points out here the problem is that your stakeholder is focused too much on the solution instead of the problem, just as the team in Trap 3. Therefore, when they describe the desired layout, tables and filters to you, respond by asking what questions they want to be able to answer. And that's critical because the questions they want to be able to answer should also drive activity to change the business. And if it doesn't, then you're simply reporting, and it's likely that your report won't be used, certainly not in the way that it should be. And he talks about nice to have, and again, this goes back to scoping and making sure with limited resources that you're applying those resources to the things that are valuable. And again, he talks about this in the context of a startup, but it's true for all data organizations. Data organizations don't have the investment that they need to be able to do everything the business wants, and that is never going to change. So making sure that you have clear line of sight to real value versus the investment in resources is critically important. And then he says one other thing which I think is really important: hold your stakeholders accountable. And to do that, you need to involve them in the roadmap planning. If they're not in the room at the beginning and the end of your sprints at least, or wherever they're needed in your sprints, then you're missing an opportunity. You're missing an opportunity for them to feel ownership of the ultimate outcome. And that needs to happen. They need to be there. And I think you're going to be challenged in that no matter where you are, because data literacy comes before that. So it's a kind of they are connected. So the more you involve them, the more data literate they're going to be. But equally, they need structure around that data literacy and the right training. So that's it for the first article. I recommend you take a quick read of this. It's no more than 4 or 5 minutes reading. But it's a good article that really sets down, I think, some key components to the elements we all understand as major challenges, whether you're in a large organization or a startup. Okay, so let's move on to our next topic, and our next topic is really a very short article that talks about which data projects should we focus on. So this is a short article actually in IT Web on Business Intelligence section by Kirsten Doyle. So again, this is really introducing actually a talk that Michael John Trotter, the head of analytics consulting at Investec, will be doing on the 11th of March. So take a look at that if you want to get more into the detail of what he has to say about this. But what he says is it comes down to cost benefit. And of course, it sounds like a really obvious thing to say, but so many data projects don't think in that way in terms of, what is the cost I'm investing? What is the return I'm expecting to get out of this? And I accept that in some cases, particularly around foundational elements, when you're really trying to get the infrastructure in place, sometimes it's very difficult to be able to establish that because you're looking for benefits on an enterprise-wide basis across the organization. Some of those things are really kind of a leap of faith type questions, but really in distinct analytical projects, you really must have a cost benefit. And it sounds like an obvious thing to say, but so few of us really actually truly understand what that really means and how you actually go about doing that, and even fewer of us actually do it on a regular basis. So data value comes from a strong decision-making culture, and that boils down to business value, of course. So he talks about cost benefit, and he talks about leveraging what is already in place in the organization. So don't go investing in massive technology stacks necessarily if you can actually leverage what's already in place well. Now, and again, that depends on what the organizational feeling is around that. I've worked in organizations that are constantly working around the existing capabilities because they have no trust in them. So it can be a little bit more complex than that, and bear that in mind. I would add a couple of things to this as real questions I think you need to ask yourself. So, and this doesn't cover it, but maybe actually Michael John covers this in his talk that he's going to do on the 11th of March. So definitely worth tuning into that. So the first question I'd ask is, how do you know where the demand is in your organization? Particularly if you're in a large organization, how do you know what the quantum of demand, what the quantum of use of data really is across the organization? So you've got to establish that. And then how do you mix really strategic with tactical? So there's always going to be pressure to deliver value quickly. And certainly this very short article doesn't touch on that, but it's not just about cost benefit, it's also about time to market and time to value. So there's much more pressure to deliver value quickly within these projects, and strategic projects take longer to realize that value. So how do you make sure you've got a good mix of perhaps more tactical projects that deliver value quickly and start to shift the culture in the organization, and you have those longer term capabilities? And when I say longer term strategic capabilities, I only mean that in the context of the end goal. I don't mean in the context of the delivery timeline. So you must be using agile capabilities to deliver value quickly, and make sure that you have an MVP approach to be able to make sure you draw down value quickly. So even the larger projects have to be chunked up into more focused capabilities and deliveries that can convince the business and keep the business on track and with you on the journey towards the end state and the longer term goal. So that's it for this article. Really small article, very simple, but I think it's a really important question that we need to continue to consider. And I don't think very many organizations are very mature in this space in terms of how do you really drive this transformation, and how do you chunk up what you need to do, where you need to focus your resources in order to get the results that you really need to achieve. Okay, let's move on to the next point, which is so far I've tried to give you one kind of legal element in each of these videos, but this is the next one. And what I would say about this is next-gen privacy, examining the EU's e-privacy regulation. The thing to recognise here is this is on the IAPP site. So I think you should be able to sign up and get access to this even if you're not an IAPP member. But IAPP is the International Association of Privacy Professionals. If you have any connection to privacy in this space, whether it be GDPR or anything like that. And most data professionals should understand at least the basics of all of these legislation components that are coming out. Then IAPP is the place for you to go, and it gives you the most up-to-date information that you can get. So running through this quickly, the thing I would say before I run through this is it's not yet law, but it will probably, the vast majority of this has been through something like 14 revisions since 2017. So this has been going on a long time, and the Portuguese president is going to take this to the EU now to pass it into regulation. The article really talks about there likely being some more revisions before it gets there, but it would be very worthwhile you examining this for your organisation to understand the impact, because I think the impact could be quite significant. Primarily, this next generation privacy laws that are being developed by the EU really is taking the e-privacy directive and making it the e-privacy regulation, or the EPR. This is quite an interesting paragraph that I thought I'd read to you. Excuse me, to take a quick journey back in time, 2002, which is when the e-privacy directive came into force. It seems like an absolute age ago now, nearly 20 years ago, was also the year the euro coins and banknotes went into production. Cirrus satellite radio and the BlackBerry smartphones were launched in that year. Who can remember those? Perhaps some of you have never even seen a BlackBerry, who knows? It was the year before the appearance of MySpace and 2 years before the birth of Facebook. Good God. 3 years before the first video was uploaded to YouTube. Given just how much has occurred in the interim, it's fair to say that the e-privacy directive has not fully kept pace with the evolution of technological and market reality. And isn't that the case? The e-privacy law, the process of making laws is just so slow. We can never expect laws to be able to keep pace with the delivery of technology. I think that's just something we have to learn to deal with, but we need to shorten the cycle. As you can see, this has taken 4 years just to get to this stage, and we expect to see further updates. So I've highlighted some text. I'm not going to go through it all because we'll end up with a hugely long video again. I think the most important aspects to recognise here that I've made notes on are the extension of laws from internet access and telco to the use of webmail, WhatsApp, and messaging services, what they call over-the-top services. And in that context, I think we all need to consider that if you extend the capability or the regulation associated with data that's transmitted over telecommunications and the internet towards services, those over-the-top services like WhatsApp. So many companies today are using WhatsApp as chat, as marketing capabilities, various other components. So many people are using geolocation off the back of the telecommunications information, but also the metadata associated with WhatsApp messages, that this will change the way you have to consider the privacy elements of what you're doing. I haven't been able to, in my relatively brief review of the documentation, identify whether this extends as far as real virtual assistants, so the likes of Alexa, and Google, etc., etc. So it will be quite interesting to see how this continues, but certainly it's addressing voice over IP, web-based email services and messaging services. So what is it doing? It's really making sure that there's a definition for the metadata, particularly the location, and it's making sure that machine-to-machine data transmitted via a public network has a regulatory body wrapped around it, and that it is from a privacy perspective based on consent. And perhaps that's possibly one of the weakest components of this, although there are elements of this that really trying to address that. Sorry, I'm just going to have a quick drink. That try to address the weakness of that, because we all know that consent has become a challenge, particularly where there are dominant players in the market, or where simply not consenting prevents you from using the service at all, or makes it close to unusable. Now, of course, there are some capabilities that require you to be able to provide that consent for location data if that's part of the service. but equally there are some that are not. And expecting the consumer to know all of those differences is incredibly challenging, I think. So consent is still at the heart of this. It's quite closely linked to GDPR, but it's specific to those capabilities. And this talks about exactly that point. So websites used by public authorities, for example, would normally fall into that camp of having a monopoly in that space, given their dominant position. But I think equally, when you think about the dominant position that Amazon plays in the space of digital assistants, or that Google play in the domain of digital voice assistants, then I think that component of consent is weakened by the fact that you can't really access the services unless you provide it. There are a number of workarounds or components that they talk about in that space. It's well worth really drilling into this in a little bit more detail. Again, I will provide the link to the article itself. Hopefully you can have access without being a member. This really talks about what's next. So clear that the Portuguese Prime Minister or presidency will take this to the European Union for final approval, but they do expect that it will go through another iteration. So we'll see what happens to this. I'll also provide a link to the actual underlying document, which is here. Again, not the most exciting read, not going to replace your novels for bedtime reading, but definitely worth having a look at and starting to consider and raise the topic with your within your organisation, particularly to your DPO in particular. Start having that conversation around how it may impact the services that you provide, the data that you collect, if in fact you are collecting data from those types of services like WhatsApp, web email, etc., etc. So if you're in that business, it's going to be very relevant. For some of you, it's not going to be relevant at all. So I think that's it for this week. That's 3 topics covered pretty quickly. Hopefully we're going to fit within the 20 minutes that I committed to, and we will see you next week. Please remember to go down, click subscribe, click the bell. That will make sure that you're notified. You can select the notification preferences. Hit the thumbs up button if you hit the thumbs up button if you have had value from what we've been able to deliver today, and make sure you comment below, because that really helps the algorithm. It also helps us engage with you, and I really want to hear from what you have to say and your comments on the video and the content within it. So make sure you engage with us. See you on LinkedIn in the forum as well, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week. Take care. Bye.